Good day, everyone. I'm glad that you are here. My name is Kevin Eikenberry. If you don't know, and we're here to hopefully talk with our guest today about innovation and change. He is not here at this moment. I am crossing my fingers. We had an exchange earlier, so I know that he's got everything he needs to be here, and I'm hoping he's just gotten caught up in something else for a couple of minutes. But while we're waiting for our guest to join us, I hope that you are glad to be here, and I hope that you will sit back and enjoy our time together. And the first thing I'd like you to do is to just click on the comments section wherever you on whatever platform you happen to be on, and say hello. Tell us where you're from, and then I'm going to ask a question of you while we're sort of waiting for our guest. But tell us who you are, where you're from, if you do that. But the other thing to ask you is this, and that is, we're going to talk today about innovation. The title of our guest book is The Human Side of Innovation. So I just like you to give me your top of mind thoughts about innovation. Let me do it this way. If I said, give me the first words that come to your mind when you hear the word innovation, what would they be? So I'll give you a second to do that. And again, whatever social platform you happen to be on, I hope that you'll just share those words with us. When you think about the word innovation, what are the words that come to your mind? Share those if you would, and I'll put them on the screen, or share them at least with the rest of the group. And I hope you'll do that. And again, this will certainly be related to our conversation, assuming our guest arrives. And if it doesn't, we'll still have a short conversation about innovation and the human side of innovation today. So looking forward to your thoughts. Again, the question is, if I asked you to give me your first words that come to mind when you hear the word innovation, what would they be? And there are no wrong answers here, of course. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And I know there's a bit of a delay between when I ask something and you have to think about it, and then you have to type. And so while you're doing that, let me just make this observation, that as leaders, we often need to be aware of that. We need to be patient, and we ask a question of our group, or of a group, or of a person, and we need to wait and give them time to process, and give them time to think, and give them time to decide if they want to respond. So hopefully I'm modeling that for you right now. Let's see, we have Eric says, innovation is taking something and making it better. Christopher says, innovation is change. And Christopher is one of the things I'm hoping that we can talk about a little bit if Mauro arrives. Amber says, when she thinks in innovation, she thinks transformation, and our guest has arrived. So I'm going to, we'll get serious here in a second. Mauro, hold on one second. I'm going to bring you in a second. I'm going to do a couple things before I do that. All right. And, Flavia says when she thinks innovation, she thinks transformation. And Mario says, a daring one must be daring. So those are just a few thoughts. So I am so glad that you all are here, and our guest is here, and I will bring him in a second. So if you didn't know, this will eventually be an episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And so I just hope that you will enjoy your time here. Imagine that you're joining my guest and I for a cup of coffee or a beverage of your choice. He might want you to pick a different beverage here in a second. But just share your comments, your questions, your ideas. They'll make for a better conversation. We'll have a better podcast eventually. So what I'm going to do now is do a countdown, which will actually be where we'll cut and actually start the podcast episode. Okay. So this is for Marissa in 3, 2, 1. While we sometimes look cautiously at change, we often feel better about the word innovation. After our conversation today, that will be even more true. Today, we're talking about the very best kinds of innovations, those that improve the status quo and help us create personal and social value, as well as financial and economic value as well. So welcome to another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. And if you're listening to this podcast, you could be live for future episodes on your favorite social channel. You can get access to future live episodes, know when we're going to do them, and therefore join us and interact with us by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups, just two of the platforms on which you can join us. And to do that, just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to do that. Today's episode is brought to you by our brand new book, The Long Distance Team, Designing Your Team for Everyone's Success. It's a book to help you think about how you design a team for a new world of work, how you create the culture that you want and need for now and in the future. And you can learn more and get your copy at longdistanceteambook.com. And with that, now I'm going to bring in our guest. He is going to join me, and there he is. And I'm going to introduce him now. And we have not had the chance to meet until right this very minute. And so our guest today is Mauro Porcini. He is a senior vice president and chief design officer at PepsiCo. That's why I said he might want you to drink something different than coffee. In the past 10 years, he and his team have won more than 1,800 design and innovation awards. And in 2018, PepsiCo was recognized by Fortune in its Business by Design list. He was previously 3M's first chief design officer. Over the years, he has been the recipient of many honors, among them Fast Company's 50 most influential designers in America, Fortune's 40 under 40, and Ad Age's list of 50 most influential creative personalities. And he can now add author to his list of accomplishments, as he is the author of The Human Side of Innovation. And he is also, I believe, the first ever guest on the show who is a knight, according to Italy. So, Mauro, welcome. I am so glad that you are here. Thanks for joining us.
Kevin, it's a pleasure to be with you. I don't have my horse. I'm a knight, but I don't have a horse yet. But I have a white dog here with me.
Well, I don't think you should try to ride that dog. I'll just say that.
It would be very difficult.
So while we were waiting for you to get here, and I'm going to change our view here for everybody. While we were waiting to get here, I was asking people when they hear the word innovation, what do they think? And we'll come back and share some of those things with you in a second. And Mike, by the way, says you'll be happy to know that Mike loves Pepsi. So we'll go there. So what I really want to do, we've got a little bit of your background here, right? But I really am curious, sort of what led you to doing this kind of work?
Passion for creating stuff, solutions, products, brands, experiences that can touch the life of people. And so then you can do that in the food and beverage industry, you can do that in aerospace, in consumer electronics, in all kind of service industries that you can imagine. You can do that anywhere. By the way, you can do that also in your private life, outside of your job, creating something that somehow help others, as a positive impact in the life of people. It could be, helping by creating something that is more functional, more convenient, but also more fun, light and enjoyable. There are many dimensions of value that we look for in our life, in our journey towards our happiness.
I knew, everybody, even though Mauro and I have not met, I knew before we started, because I've read the book, that this was going to be a different kind of podcast. And you already now know that that's the case. So we're going to talk about innovation a lot. And the first question or the next question that I had for you, I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to go back and share some of the things that people answered when I asked them earlier, when they think innovation, what do they think? But I want you to answer this question, because one person actually said, well, innovation means change to them. So are innovation and change the same? And in your mind, how are they different?
Well, if we want to use the word, I would add something else, positive change, right? Essentially, innovation is all about taking the status quo, identifying an opportunity to create something that is valuable for people, that can add some form of meaningful value for people, and changing the status quo in a positive way, for the better.
It is. Taking something and making it better is what someone actually said, right?
Taking something and you synthesize it in a perfect way. Yeah, transformation is part of that, but and it's interesting when you interpret innovation in that way. You understand that you can apply innovation to anything. if you Google the word innovation, if you go online and you search, and in conversations that often we have around innovation, we often talk about technology. You think about, major breakthrough innovations, but the reality is that the innovation mindset can be leveraged and applied to a packaging design project, to the next brand campaign, to the definition of your team, the way you create the culture of your team. Anything is innovation when you take the status quo and you transform it, you change it for the better. In fact, I use the same tools to design a product and to design a team, a culture. We're working on the 10 years anniversary book of Design at PepsiCo, and I was writing the intro page exactly this morning. And I was talking exactly about this, how we've been using the lenses of design thinking, the approach of design thinking to design the entire PepsiCo capability, the entire function. That by definition was a project of innovation. It's the meta project, the design of culture, but in an innovative way because it's new to the company. And as I'm sure many people listening to us right now know very well, when you try to build a new culture within an existing company, build a new capability that by definition is going to overstep all other functions because the company was anyway working, on those dimensions you're going to touch before you existed. That's an innovation project by definition. If you screw up that innovation project, all that more traditional innovation projects, so the redesign of your products and brands and services and experiences, will fail miserably.
Right, because we're saying at the higher level that isn't really what matters, right? So you've written this book called The Human Side of Innovation, and in it you say that innovation is an act of love. And so I'd love for you to unpack that for people a little bit. What do you mean? That's a bold statement. Someone said something about being daring. Well, there you go. Like, what do you mean when you say that?
Look, I love the fact that we started this conversation talking about innovation as change or innovation as transformation. So think about the very first act of innovation of us, human beings. It happened thousands and thousands of years ago when the prehistoric woman or man decided for the first time to take two stones and scratch them against each other to create a tool, to modify what was available in nature. For what? Well, at the beginning, to create a tool for hunting, then to prepare the food, then later on to decorate your body, later on to create something to celebrate your gods. Now, just these few uses, and there were many other uses, but these few define a series of needs that Maslow, thousands of years later, defined in his pyramid. At the base is survival, so it's the physiological needs, is nurturing yourself. Then there are the needs at the center, is connecting with others, is defining your identity in connection to those others, the decoration of your body, as an example, all the way to the needs at the top of the pyramid, celebrating your gods and going beyond yourself. Well, when you fulfill all those needs, you reach your happiness. I mean, very simply, this is what all of this is about. So innovation back then, creating these products, was by definition an act of love towards yourself and towards the people close to you that you were creating these objects for. Now, at a certain point, when those people started to create, many objects, at a certain point, they realized that they couldn't do it all by themselves. They needed to go to their neighbors and ask them, can you create some of them? And I will create others, and we exchange them. And so they started in this way. Then that kind of activity started to scale up, and we invented the idea of work, the idea of companies, the idea of brands, and then we scale it up more and more and more until at a certain point, very recently, in the past 100 years, we started to confuse the idea of creating as an act of love for others. So really creating the most extraordinary solution that you could think of. Like if I'm creating a product for my daughter, of course, I'm going to really care about having the best of the best of the best if I'm doing it with my hands. We started to change that with the love for profit, with creating for profit. I'm not going to do the best of the best of the best. I'm going to do something good enough, but very profitable, that really generate financial value for my company. And if in my industry, mediocre products, average products are the standard of the industry, it is what it is. You know, it's a beautiful, dynamic situation, dynamic balance where I don't need to do more if that more is impacting my margin, is impacting my profitability. This has been, unfortunately, the logic of essentially any industry for many, many years. After the very first product was created, it was defined in that industry, then, you know, over time, you create, there was this dynamic balance. And, you know, with many peak of excellence and many, you know, problems in other situations. Until 20 years ago, more or less, the world started to change radically through digitization, new technologies in general beyond those, and globalizations, all of those things combined. So all of a sudden, the people in the street, anybody listening to us right now, anybody can come up with an idea, get easy access to funding through the proliferation of investment funds and incubators, looking for the next big idea to build the next big startup. You get out of school today, you dream of building your startup. You don't dream anymore to just join a big corporation and do what your parents eventually did in the past. All of this idea of building a startup today is plausible. You can go online in Kickstarter.com and crowdfund your idea. Cost of manufacturing is going down, driven once again by globalization and new technology. So it costs less to produce your idea, and you can go straight to your end user in many industries, not all of them, but in many industries, through e-commerce to sell them your product, and through social media to build your ecosystem of communication. So these were the areas where the big corporations used to build their big barriers to entry, made of scale of production, communication, and distribution. These barriers to entry are crumbling down under, you know, the winds of this new scenario. And so we are left, and I will close, we are left with just one option. Big companies and small companies, they need to refocus everything, their culture, the way their people think, to one variable, the human being, the people. They need to start from a position of love, the one we used to have thousands of years ago, and thinking, okay, that person I'm serving with my product is like my daughter, is like my wife or my husband or my significant other, is like my parents. I care about them. I love them. I want to create something that is extraordinary. His product, his branding, his service, is everything. And so this is what should drive companies big and small today. And for a simple reason, if you don't do it, if you have areas of weakness, that's exactly where your competition will arrive. You may have a good product and a good brand, but the service is not good, competition will arrive there, and they don't have the barriers to stop them that our industries used to have in the past. You need that excellence. I call this age the age of excellence. Either you do it or somebody else will do it on your behalf.
So one of the things that is very clear, and if it wasn't clear to people by me introducing you, it's definitely clear to them now that you are a designer. The question is, can the rest of us be designers?
Look, I think we need to be really clear about the difference between design and design thinking. And forget design thinking. You know, design thinking is a word that has been abused in so many different ways, and it had many successes and many failures. So let's define, in this specific context, when I talk about design thinking, is the way of thinking of these designers. So when you go to design school, what do you study? Well, they teach you to observe people, to be an ethnographer, an anthropologist, to understand their needs and their wants and their dreams. And you fall in love with those people at the end. You really want to create something really good for them. This is what drives you. What you do as a designer, you create a product, a brand, an experience for them. And it needs to be the best of the best and the most innovative. So changing the status quo for the better. Then they tell you, by the way, you also need to make money with it. Else no company will give you, the possibility to do that product. I was like, okay, is something that I need to consider. But what drives us is to create extraordinary products and brands. And this is when we can, brag with people, we can advance our careers. If you are in business, and I'm going to be a little bit provocative now, you go to school and they teach you to grow a business from A to B. Then they tell you, by the way, there are different levers that you can use. The product is one of them. You also have communication, but you have your supply chain. You have so many levers. So if you go in a company and you grow a business from A to B exponentially without touching the product, even if your product is mediocre, because you're so good at leveraging your distribution, your branding, other things, you're a hero anyway. Now, this worked for many years, but in a world where you need extraordinary excellence, actually, in every dimension. So we talk about product, but this is something, even if your product is good and is established, we're talking about innovation and excellence in the way you communicate, in a world that moves at the speed of light. So where something happens, you need to be ready to react with your brand, in social media, in many different situations. Is the way you sell the product, is the experience you build. It's really something at 360 degrees, holistic. So if you need a kind of approach, well, then you need the human-centered mindset of the designers. That's why often I don't call this approach that we designers know that is a design-driven approach. I don't call it design-driven. I call it human-centered. To, first of all, not to alienate the non-designers. Second, to clarify, this is not just about designers. I need marketers, engineers, scientists of any kind, finance people, HR, all the different functions and capabilities and professional communities to have this design-driven mindset, or let's call it human-centered. Is also the reason why the book that I wrote doesn't have the word design in the title or subtitle. The human side of innovation it talks about human centricity, but it's design-driven. Now, another thing to consider, very important, this is what you study in design school. So if you have a company right now, or you are the leader of innovation of, in your organization of any kind, you think, oh, well, I can go and hire a designer now and apply this approach and help and having this designer becoming a little bit of the ambassador of the new culture for everybody else to follow. Well, it's not that simple, because in design school, they teach you that kind of culture. The problem is that armies of thousands and thousands, actually millions of designers all around the world get out of design schools and they have no way to practice that approach. They go in a company, and the company put them in the little bucket of cake decoration, do the styling of the product, do the styling of the packaging. And so 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, after a while, you forget completely that kind of culture. There is no space in many situations. And so to find this kind of design thinkers that could be the ambassadors of that new culture within your company, to then have all the other functions embracing the same approach, is damn difficult, and is being one of my biggest challenge in the past 10 years, hiring more than 300 designers that we have now in the organization, talking with thousands of them to find the right talents. It's difficult, and is one of the reasons why also mostly we're growing them from within. I mean, we've been hiring at executive level, vice president level, many people, but we are understanding that really growing them from within with that kind of new culture, design at 360 degrees is our best option to get those kind of talents.
And that's kind of the back half of the book. When you talk about this person being a unicorn, I want to get to that, but I've got a couple other things I want to ask you before we get there, to help all of us think about this human-centered approach. And one of the things that really struck me in the book, and it's a little bit of a detour, but I think it's really important. You talk about the idea of having good answers to wrong questions. And I think that the human-centered part of that is part of the answer to that. But I'd like you to talk about that, because we in organizations, as leaders, are often really good at coming up with answers. But the question is, are we asking the right question? You want to talk to this just for a second. Maybe give us as leaders some things to think about here, and maybe help us realize if we're asking the right question or not.
Yeah. Look, every time, for instance, let's start with my personal experience. They hire me at PepsiCo or they hire me at 3M, and their question for me, the first question was in the job description. We want you to do certain things. And normally I could be like, okay, I'm going to do what you asked me in this job description. In 3M, that I joined more than 20 years ago, I was 27 years old. I was not the chief design officer of the company. The question was very simple: design certain products. For them, design was mostly the aesthetic in this business. In Pepsi was more evolved, but still, there was not yet understanding of what design could really do in the company. Not even from me, by the way, because I didn't know the industry yet. And so what we should always do is why they're asking me something. So when they ask you something, it could be a real question or in the form of a brief or in the form of a job description or whatever it is. Ask yourself why. And when you get the first answer, ask yourself why again, and then why again, why, until you arrive to the primary cause, to the root cause. This is what, by the way, the philosophers do. They've been doing this all their life. And in fact, in philosophy, in the history of philosophy, we find all the answers and solutions of any kind of problem we always, we have. But it's also what kids do. Is the child approach, asking the dad and the mom, why? So let's use this technique. And by the way, let's not be shy to use this technique. Often we think that we should have all the answers already. No, we don't. Nobody has. The real wise man, Socrates, used to tell us, is the one that knows of not knowing. So let's start from that assumption. But let me now give you a very simple metaphor to explain this idea. Let's say that the question that you receive is design a bridge. The vast majority of the people will design the bridge, and they will design the best possible bridge, the most beautiful one and the most functional one. The real innovator will start to ask, why do I need to design a bridge? You may find, the first answer is, well, I need to move from one side of the river to the other side of the river. At that point, you ask yourself, why again? Why do you need to move from A to B? Well, because in B, there is a school. Well, then maybe the first solution is that instead of a bridge, I need, I don't know, something faster, an helicopter, something that when they made the first bridge 100 years ago, nobody considered because there was not that alternative solution. But the better solution to that, actually, for your town, maybe could be to build a school in your town. And maybe you build a bridge for them as a temporary solution, but then you start to make a case for the school. This is what innovation is about. Is your business asking you to redo over and over and over again the same thing? And when you ask why, you arrive to the root cause that, by the way, changed because everything around you has been changing. The company was created 20, 50 or 100 years ago is a different company today because the society is different. But maybe you are still stuck with the same kind of product, service, solution. But if you start to ask yourself why, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to build a school in your town on year one. Maybe you will need also to invest to build a new bridge on year one to make everybody happy. But from year one, in parallel, you will start to work on building the school in the town because that's the solution that the town really needs.
Got it. That's really excellent, and I think that you're right. We often ask the wrong question, and I appreciate your approach to say let's use the why question, which we know is valuable, as a way to help us make sure we're uncovering the right question so we can get the right answer. One other sort of random-ish thing from the book that I think is incredibly valuable for all of us, especially as leaders, and that's this idea of being a surfer of trends or a trend surfer. What do you mean, and how do we do it?
Well, in the book, I surf a little bit, and I explain this a little bit more. Essentially, if you are a surfer, you're out there on the water with your board, and the real good surfer is the one that understands when the right wave is about to arrive. And I found myself so many times in a situation where there are many surfers out there, and then there is one that start to paddle. And everybody's like, why is paddling? I mean, it's just too early, or we don't see what he sees.
Right.
There is this big wave arriving, but he starts to paddle before us, so that when the wave arrives, he's ready and he catch it and he does something that nobody else can do. So the surfer of trend is somebody that essentially is in tune with humanity. And being in tune with humanity means also being in tune with society, because we're organized within, the context that we call society, and in tune with the planet as well, because the planet is the environment where we live. And so in tune means that somehow you have that sensitivity, but also that ability to observe reality, to understand people, the curiosity to keep putting yourself out there, out of your comfort zone, to, with intuition, understand when things are about to happen, when the society is changing, when there are new opportunities. By the way, in the 3 dimensions of innovation, in the 3 dimensions of design thinking, the 3 lenses, humanity, people, but also the technology that is humanity produce, and the business models that is humanity leverage. So always being there, understanding what's going on, and then being able, before anybody else, to catch that trend when it starts to manifest itself. And for instance, in my case, if you work in a big corporation, trying to transform that trend in something that is scalable, you could become one of the drivers of scale of that trend through your platform.
So I mentioned it earlier. I mean, you were talking about it, and I said we'd talk a little bit about it. Sort of the back part of the book is about how do we find and how do we develop these unicorns, the people you're talking about, like that can really leverage this human-centered approach to thinking and work. And we don't have time to dive in deeply to all of it, but I will say to all of you, if you have enjoyed what you've gotten so far, and if you love what you're about to hear, you want to make sure you go get a copy of The Human Side of Innovation. Find bookstores, wherever, right? Online, offline, whatever, The Human Side of Innovation. I hope you'll do that. So having said that, you basically have said that these folks that you're really trying to find or develop, as you said, possess 4 big skill sets. Can you just, at a very high level, talk about those 4 skill sets for us?
Yeah, look, there are some that are more obvious than others. For instance, is the ability to think big, to dream. We are all born as children. We all have this kind of ability. We dream, we fantasize, and then over the years, society, people around us, tell us that that's very childish. You should grow, right? But still, we preserve that ability. We go to school, we get out of school, we go to these companies, and we still dream. We dream that we could change the product, we could change the brand, we could even change that industry or that entire corporation. And then you face people that tell you, this is crazy. I mean, it's so arrogant from you to think that you can change a company like this or an industry. Why do you think you could do it? Nobody else did it before. So at a certain point, you start to convince yourself that actually dreaming is wrong, that is childish indeed. And instead, it's not. There are few people that preserve that ability no matter the context, no matter everything that is going on. But that's not enough either. If you just dream and you live in the comfort zone of dreaming, if you like dreaming, that become a comfort zone, nothing is going to happen. So one of the first characteristics of these unicorns is the ability to balance the ability to dream with the ability to make things happen, to execute. Now, that means also to take trade-offs and compromises and understand that by taking those trade-offs, you're not betraying that dream. If you have the dream, you have the vision, The trade-offs are just a way to get closer and closer to the dream. Now, you need the dream. If you just take trade-offs without a vision and a dream, they're just trade-offs, and they're often meaningless in the world of innovation. Now, this is one of those characteristics of these unicorns that you don't find that easily in companies, because people have their brief, their performance review at the end of the year, and they're like, okay, this is what is charted in my
and that's what I got to be focused on.
Yeah, exactly. And so these kind of people, disruptors, they're not easy to find, and even when you find them, they have a very hard time in these companies unless there are executives in the company that build a safe space for these people and the right territory for them to thrive, and also help them connecting with the rest of the organization at a certain point. But this is one dimension. There are others that are less obvious. For instance, the optimism, kindness, curiosity, and many others, empathy, respect. And there are 23 characteristics of these unicorns. And by the way, this book, there is a lot of theory, but it's really based on the practice of my life, my professional life, and my personal life as well. So take it for, for what it is my experience. In my experience, that brought me not just to become, an executive of a big corporation now for many years, not just one, but to become also a happy person. I'm happy. I'm really happy in what I do at work and what I do in my life. So, and this book is about business, is about innovation, but it's a book about life. It closes talking about how to design happiness, how to apply everything to happiness, because for me, the two things are totally connected. If you are miserable at home or in your life, you can't be happy at work, and vice versa. If you're miserable at work, you will bring it home. So the two things are together. And so again, kindness, optimism, curiosity, and all the other characteristics made completely the difference for me in this journey. Let's talk briefly about these three, and again, there are many more. Curiosity. I mean, curiosity pushes you to get out of your comfort zone. It pushes you to read, to travel, to speak to people. Curious people love, by definition, different people, diverse people, people with a different background, because they see in that diversity the precious gift of knowledge. These people will know something, or they will see life in a way different than mine. So I can learn a lot. I can learn the different perspective that maybe has something that is better, for me, for my life, or that different perspective can help me understand my perspective in a different way. But innovation is all about this. Innovation is about looking at something with your eyes, with your background and biases, and because of that, you always see the same thing, until you talk with somebody that has a different perspective, or you read a book, or you have an experience that push you to change your perspective, and all of a sudden you see something that you never saw before. In this dialogue with people different from you, so in a diverse kind of team, I could see something that you don't see. Maybe still my perspective and your perspective still see the status quo, but through respectful dialogue, respect is another of the characteristics of the unicorns, we build perspective A plus perspective B, build perspective C. That's the innovative perspective, the blended perspective that nobody ever had before. So this is what curiosity is about. And very pragmatically in a company, we have all kinds of tools and platforms for education of our people. The reality is that you may have 0 platforms and just be curious with the tools that are available to us today online in this digital world. You can learn so much and grow so much. When you are in a company, if you're curious and you are a designer, for instance, you can see your marketers and your scientists and engineers and finance people as your mentors. You can learn so much from them. They're your MBA, your PhD, but it's about you. And that's more valuable than any tool I can give you. Even if I give you tools, if you don't have that curiosity, you're not even be able to use those tools in the right way. For me, in education and growth, tools are 5% of the equation, and 95 is your curiosity. And then optimism, when you innovate, when you change, when you transform, you will face roadblocks all the time. If you don't face roadblocks, it means that you're not changing anything. And so because of this, you need to be an optimistic kind of person. You need to see the glass half full of the time. And as any other of the 23 characteristics, part of them are inside ourselves when we're born, and some of us have them more than others. There are people that are more optimistic than others, but the other half of each of these characteristics is something that we can grow by practicing, by
Right.
and so the starting point though needs to be the awareness about the fact that this is important. So if I'm more pessimistic and I realize that optimism is actually one of the key driver of growth for myself personally, professionally, and for my company, my brands, and my products, well, then I'm going to practice it. And for instance, one way, when I have a really bad moment, is a very difficult day, and I need to be anyway positive, I try to step back. I remember the dream, I remember where I'm going, the vision, and that gives me a lot of energy already. And then I look back and I remember where I came from and the steps I did to arrive to where I am today. So even if the today seems impossible and shitty and is really a bad day, remembering what happened in the past and where you're going helps so much changing perspective in a more positive way. And then there is kindness. But Kevin, I'm talking a lot. You tell me, I can tell you about kindness or I can pause here. Kindness for me is important.
Well, I think I would, I'm sure that many of us would like to hear us have a conversation about all 23, but we've talked about curiosity and optimism and kindness, and I want to value the time of everyone. So I've got a couple of other questions for you before we wrap up, and we're going to share.
Then just a nudge. I'm not going to talk about kindness, but I link kindness to productivity. I show in the book, if you will happen to read the book, how by having kind people, you can drive everything you do, innovation or a business in general, with much, much more efficiency and effectiveness. Today, eventually was not the case 20, 30 years ago. We're in a different kind of situation. Today, where you need to be hyper efficient, you need a kind of kindness in the organization. So I'm not going to talk about the how and why. If you're curious, there is in the book, or if you want, I can talk at the end of this conversation.
The human side of innovation, everybody. But now I want to shift gears. You've told us one thing you do for fun, which is surfing. But what else do you do for fun?
Well, I mean, I used to be, when I was younger, really, really sportive. I was playing soccer semi-professional, and then, job, work, travel, I lost a little bit of that. But I always love sport where there is a fun component. So I love surfing, I love snowboarding, I love to play soccer with friends now when it's possible. So that component for sure. And then on top of that, walking, traveling, meeting people, sharing these experiences with people that I really, really care about and I really love is a big part of what I do. I'm always hungry for learning new things, that curiosity that I was talking about earlier. So getting out of the office or my home and meeting people, going to events, travel is something I love.
And one of the things when we were talking about curiosity that you mentioned, that one of the things that might help us with that, because we're curious, we do this, is reading. So I'm curious if there's something that you're reading these days or that you've read recently that you might want to point out to people. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, look, I am inspired always by the biographies of people that in a way or the other either are changing the world now or they did in the past. So a few that I may suggest, the iconic biography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson that I think many people already read. When I finished the book, I was like, okay, I need to change the world, and I felt like I was doing nothing, no matter I was doing already, decent things. I was like, no, I need to do more. The same impact on me had the two autobiographies of Richard Branson, Finding My Virginity and Losing My Virginity. What I particularly like of Richard is that it's not just human-centered innovation, because that's what he did all his life. It was identifying a frustration that he personally had or people around him had, and building an entire company around that. Oh, the cell phone bill is too high. I'm going to build my own cell company, train company, aviation company. It's amazing. But it's not just that. Is that at a certain point in his life, he had a layer of purpose to everything he was doing. When he started to have a platform and the financial resources to do it, he did amazing things that you can find in the book to really help humanity, society in so many different ways. So innovation, human-centered innovation from product to purpose, wonderful. From Isaacson, the biography of Einstein, of Leonardo da Vinci, amazing. Or the biography of Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. The book is The Shoes Dog is another one. I could go on and on, but yeah.
Well, that's a good list, most of which I have read, a few of which have been recommended here before, but not all of them. And we'll have those in the show notes for everybody, along with, of course, the human side of innovation. Mauro, before we go, where do you want to point people? Where do you want them to go? What do you want them to know? Where do you want them to learn more about you and the book, etc.?
Well, I'm pretty active in LinkedIn and in Instagram, Mauro Porcini, in both dimensions. And then if I have a minute to add one, closing comment, I don't know if you have more questions, but there is a subtitle in the book that I love particularly, that for me, I wanted that to be the title, but it would have been misleading. So the title is The Human Side of Innovation, but the subtitle is The Power of People in Love with People. And for me, people in love with people, the people in love with people are the unicorns, those kind of people we're talking about earlier. But people in love with people summarize everything we discussed today. And as if you want, everything is also in that book. There are three dimensions of love. One is the love for the people you serve, that original idea of innovation, really obsessing in creating something formidable for people. The second dimension of love is the love for what you do. That is so important, especially when you do innovation, because it's difficult. And again, you will face many closed doors and roadblocks along the way. You need to love what you do. And by the way, if you love what you do, you're going to be happy, because our work occupies so much time of our life that is important. If anybody listening to us right now is not happy, in what they do, they should really seriously consider to change. And then the third dimension of love is the love for the people surrounding us. It's not a one woman or one man show. Anything is not innovation. It's not our job. It's not our life. We have people surrounding us that we need to bring with us. And to bring them with us, the first step is to care about them, is to love them. If you love them, they will give you love back. But it starts with a selfless act of really caring about them, and then they will come with you.
And everybody, I would say that if you're with me, you have loved this conversation. Mauro, thank you so much for joining us. I have a good question before we wrap up. I have a question for all of you who are watching or listening, whether it's live or whether it's later. It's the question I ask every time we gather. And the question is, now what? What are you going to do as a result? There's 50 things that I've written down that I'm going to think about, what I'm going to act on, what choices I'm going to make, what actions I'm going to take. And I encourage you to do the same, to think, because if you don't take action from this, you might have been inspired. You might have gotten a new perspective, but nothing's really going to change unless you take some action. And so it is my hope that this conversation helps you create something new and better, to innovate, if you will, in your life in ways that make a difference for you, those around you. And so, Mauro, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Kevin. Really, it's been a pleasure for me as well.
And so, everyone, I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you tell someone else, and make sure maybe you want to like and subscribe if you're on the podcast. But most of all, I hope you'll be back for another episode because we'll be back in next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everyone.